Cycling Fashion Week, the only global podcast purely focused on cycling style, aesthetics, fashion, and culture. I am your host, Alex, joined by my co-hosts Warren and Tony. And Cycling Fashion Week is brought to you by Le Club. Go to leclub.cc. They are your one-stop shop, your go-to destination for this season's hottest premium cycling apparel. They've got brands like MAP, Universal Colors, Quack shoes, Sweet Protection helmet. They've got everything. They've even got Albion, great British brand that we like here on Cycling Fashion Week. And they're the nicest people. They got the best coffee. leclub.cc. Beautiful new online experience, fast, perfect shipping. It'll be at your door pretty quickly. And if you use the code FashionWeek15, you get 15% off. And that's amazing. 15% off on the best cycling products. And actually, we've seen some people in Instagram stories tag us saying, thank you for the discounts. Appreciate seeing that. This is what we're here for, giving you the best discounts on the best stuff over at leclub.cc. Go check them out. Warren and Tony, what's up?
Been watching a fair bit of the tour. Currently, Jonas Vingegaard is in the yellow jersey. Don't know if that will change in the next little bit, because kind of surprised, but pretty good stage today, stage 14. Pogacar was attacking in like 10K in, so at least it's exciting. I don't care who wins the yellow jersey. I just want some entertainment.
It's been a great tour so far. I mean, their speeds are phenomenal. It's really good. All that stuff that Lance sells on the podcast, they're probably using to help him out legally. And the attacks. I mean, Pog is kind of seems like, you know, he's got a bit of an old school thing. He wants to crush everybody.
Warren, did you say Pogacar? Is that what you said?
Yeah, probably.
Do you listen to the British version of the tour on Flow Bikes with the Eurosport? It's Pogacar.
Oh, no, I don't listen to Flow. I'm not a Flow Bikes guy. I'm a GCN Plus guy, but they are British, so.
Okay, well, look,
Pogacar.
This isn't going to become a racing podcast. We leave that to our many good friends who have racing podcasts out there, but there's a couple of things I want to bring up from watching the tour. I don't understand Wout van Aert. So Wout van Aert obviously going to win the green jersey. It seems like a slam dunk that he's going to get the points classification. I don't understand the lack of consistency of Wout van Aert wearing the green bibs with the green jersey one day and then the black bibs with the green jersey the other day. I think you got to go all green helmet, green bike, green shoes, green bibs, green everything. But he sort of mixes it up, and I find it a little bit annoying. I would say stick with one thing. The other thing I wanted to bring up, and Warren, you highlighted this, I think there's a team classification element this year, which means that there's a special helmet.
They've had that for a while. They've had it for a long time, yeah.
However, Ineos with this, is it BioRacer who makes their kit that we talked about, where the fit didn't look all that great? It seems like they've potentially corrected these issues. They're wearing this yellow helmet with their red and black kit, and it looks terrible. I think they got to go to either a white helmet or a black helmet, or maybe a red helmet. I don't know. But the yellow helmet does not look good with that Ineos kit.
If you recall during our chat with David Millar, Wigo once he had the green jersey and they had the team classification. So he had the yellow helmet with the green jersey, and I think David said that it looked like a Lego man. It's hard to pull off with anything. Just unless you also have yellow, it's hard to pull off a yellow helmet really with anything but a full yellow kit.
It's not good. Another great tradition of the Tour de France is listening to the Move podcast by Lance Armstrong. Unfortunately, Lance, Johan Brunel, and Jonathan Vaughters did not take us up on our offer for them to come hash out their differences on our podcast.
It's a standing offer, though. Anytime.
It's a standing offer, but it has so far remained unanswered. So if the listeners want to assault them with requests to come on the podcast to hash things out, we'd be happy to. But the other thing I find incredible on the Move was I was listening the other day, and Lance, obviously he says, welcome to the Move. Before we talk about the race, let's do a little bit of business. Then he advertises some stuff. And he was advertising some sort of supplement that was boosting your red blood cells in your legs And I mean, I thought the level of self-awareness there was incredible. Shout out Lance. This was the best ad read that he's done in a long time.
I'm sure Lance, whatever Lance is pushing, is totally on the level, definitely legal. He would never push anything morally questionable or anything like that.
What is something, like, we're not going to do supplements because we're not about fitness or speed, but like, what is something morally, fashionably questionable that we could push that people will be like, oh, these guys, like, are they real sellouts? Like obviously, like, being sponsored by the club is legit because they only sell the best stuff. And I'm not just saying that, like, they actually do. I mean, I think everyone kind of knows that we're on board with what they sell, but like, what could be our version of blood doping supplements?
Compression socks. If a compression sock company came in and I said, hey, everyone, welcome to Cycling Fashion Week, the only global podcast focused on cycling fashion. Let's do a little bit of business here. Let me talk about XYZ compression socks. Just the best socks in the business. They go up to your knees. They're incredible. They just boost your performance. People would be like, whoa, wait a minute. This is
like,
very
honestly,
off-brand.
like, the fashion of it is such a change. All these sort of shorter socks, they don't really help your style and stuff. And we just be, just hucking the ugliest stuff. That's what I mean. I guess that's when like
if we ever do that, just shout out to the listeners should know, if we ever do that, you can Canal us definitively, because we will not do that. This is not our style here on Cycling Fashion Week. Okay, before we go into the regular segments, and by the way, huge episode this week, as always, but this week we are welcoming Nick Squillari from Velokicks. You probably remember, I'm going to say 2 months ago, 6 weeks ago, I can't remember, Tony threw Velokicks in the Canal, and we got a call from Nick at Velokicks who inquired as to why we canaled him. And actually the following episode, Tony kind of recognized his mistake. And actually we struck up a very good conversation with Nick over at Velokicks. And we thought that we'd have him on the program to do a bit of a deep dive on cycling shoes, how they should fit, how they should look. So pretty deep dive on cycling shoes here. Some good Australian banter with Nick as well from Velokicks. He's from Melbourne. So that's coming later on this episode of Cycling Fashion Week. But before we go into the regular segments, there's one thing I want to talk about, because we have a lot of good friends here on this podcast. And this is a project where a few of our friends or friends of the podcast have collaborated to create something that's actually pretty cool that we wanted to give a shout out to on the program. So you'll remember our friend Prempton, the owner of Alpha Velo in Toronto. He's pretty big on Instagram. He's pretty big in the Toronto cycling community as well. So Prempton Batku, he collaborated with Rosewood Winery, which is based in Beamsville, Ontario, in beautiful Niagara region, sort of south of Toronto. So if you look at Lake Ontario, you go south from there, the other shore of Lake Ontario, that's basically where the Niagara region is, for those people who don't know that. And region's got a microclimate. They produce a lot of wine, produce peaches. It's a pretty fertile land, and there's a number of beautiful wineries there, one of which is Rosewood Wine, and they are friends of the podcast, and they did something that we think is actually pretty cool, both aesthetically, but we also think it's amazing for a good cause. So Prempton and Rosewood, they designed the Unite with Ukraine Alpha Velo jersey, which is made by Q36.5, so very respected, highly technical Italian brand from Bolzano, Q36.5. And they made a jersey which has a pattern of traditional Ukrainian embroidery called Vyshyvanka. And essentially the proceeds of the sale of that jersey will go to provide support to Ukraine in the current humanitarian and the war that's going on with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So it's a beautiful jersey, Vyshyvanka pattern. Jersey is white. It's got some sort of burgundy, pretty fitting for a winery, burgundy colored patterns on the jersey. It's made by Q36.5, so amazing quality. Check it out. So check out the Instagram account at Rosewood Wine. You can order from there. It's a pre-order, and I ordered mine in a size medium because I think it's an incredible looking jersey, and I think it's important to support Ukraine as they grapple with this brutal invasion that Russia has carried out in Ukraine.
Also, they make a beautiful dry Riesling that I believe they call blue and yellow. The label's phenomenal. It's got the wheat and the sort of blue sky. And I believe that is also towards promoting awareness and helping the cause of the humanitarian issues and what's going on in the Ukraine. And I think the jersey's a great idea. I think it's fun. People are going to spend some good money on jerseys anyways. It's fun to be able to do that and support a cause. And then we love wine here. And honestly, the wine, the labels, forget about before Alex sort of taught me a little bit about wine, I only picked on labels. I'd be like, that label looks cool. I'll buy that wine. And it's, not too expensive. Now, the good thing about Rosewood is all their labels are so beautiful, but their wine is also great. So you get a beautiful labeled wine and you're going to get a quality wine.
Not to take away from the jersey or the cause, because I think all those things are great, but I did just want to highlight, Alex, that you talked about Lake Ontario as if any of our listeners not from Ontario or Quebec would have any idea where Lake Ontario is.
Well, it's one of the Great Lakes of North America.
I would say it's the greatest lake of North America.
We have a lot of listeners in Europe now, so
that's true.
That's all I'm saying.
Well, we're giving them a little geography lessons. We can talk about Huron, we can talk about Erie, we can talk about Superior, we can talk about Michigan. Just start talking about the lakes and what major cities use them as their waterway.
Lake Fashion Week.
Boo.
Lake shoes.
Lake shoes. Oh, and you're the writer, Warren.
Okay, our first segment this week, the Panache Police. The Panache Police, very famous segment in the cycling world. It's where we discuss the hot button issues, the controversial topics. It's a crossfire. There's a lot of debate, and we just don't shy away from the controversy. And this week, Warren's going to introduce it.
Hot topic. We talk a lot about gravel cycling and how we're not big fans. You should only do it on a road bike. Well, last weekend, I was doing an event in rural Ontario, just north of Colborne, Ontario. You all know where that is. It's called the Reggie Ramble. Great event. It's actually tied to a kit brand called Reggie, which, tying back to our last episode where Tony was talking about how there aren't any kit brands in English Canada. They are one. And the Reggie Ramble is this big gravel event that's been going on for a couple of years, started pre-COVID and then came back last year. Anyway, I was doing the 200K ride, which is, it's 200K, 3,000 meters of climbing, really hard ride. I'll admit I was riding my cross bike. I know we say only ride road bike, but that's a lot of gravel. We don't need to dive in whether that's acceptable or not.
Your cross bike stem is still slammed though, right?
Sure. Yeah. And
the noble lie.
Anyway, something that came up in the event leading to the question, does anyone actually really like gravel? Because here I am signed up for a 200K gravel ride. So 200K of mostly gravel. There's a little bit of road, but it's either gravel or rough trails and single track. And about 25K into the ride, the start of the ride, pretty mellow. We were on some really easy gravel roads, not very rough. I've got a steel gravel bike, a Ritchie Swiss Cross, beautiful bike, by the way. Anyway, the gravel wasn't rough is my whole point. And then we rode that for maybe 10, 15K in a row. And then at one point we turned off onto this paved section, and multiple people it was still one big group to start. It hadn't blown up yet. Multiple people in this group, as we went onto the pavement, only 20K and 25K in, we're like, oh, thank God, pavement. And I was just like, what?
It's a gravel event.
Wait, it's a 200K gravel event. You've barely even started and people are already saying how great it's to be on the road.
Yeah, because nobody really likes gravel. It's all a scam.
Well, that's the question I wanted to pose. Does anyone actually like riding gravel? Because, sometimes you'll go on a road ride on your road bikes and people will be like, yeah, let's throw in some gravel roads. And then you get on the gravel road and all everyone is trying to do is get the smoothest line. No one's riding the washboards. Everybody just wants the line with the least amount of gravel, even though everyone's like, yeah, let's throw in some gravel roads on this road ride. And then even this, it's a full-on gravel event. You got people on giant 50C tires, and everyone's like, oh, or not everyone, a large number, at least 5 people were like, woo.
Oh, and I'm sure some didn't say it out loud, but I've had that on some gravel rides. Maybe more if it was less luxury gravel, more ATV track stuff where I've gotten off and I'm like, oh, thank God. I think gravel has done a great job marketing itself. the gravel community. It's a community, very supposed to be very positive and fun, and you drink craft beer and you wear your hat backwards and stuff like that. But the reality is it's just not as fun as road cycling. It's a lot more miserable. You're dirtier. It's more of a toll on your body. But people want to be part of it, and so everyone does it because they're told, oh, you gotta do. Oh, it's fun. You can race, but it's more chill, and it's all this kind of Colorado vibes. And then nobody really likes it, and they're all secretly thinking, shit, I'd rather go for a road ride. But marketing is important.
I contend that there are two kinds of gravel out there, and I'm going to use a bit of geography for our international listeners here to explain what I call the gravel duality. And where I live in Quebec, the province is separated by the St. Lawrence River. There's north of the St. Lawrence River and there's south of the St. Lawrence River.
Fuck, we're talking about waterways a lot.
We love waterways. We love feet as well. This is a perfect episode for Cycling Fashion Week. North of the St. Lawrence River is a region called the Laurentians, the mountains, and the gravel there is really rough. It's like big rocks, ATV tracks, MTB type stuff, like mountain bike. South of the St. Lawrence River, which is where I ride mostly, region called the Eastern Townships, what would be called gravel there is more like a dirt road, like a finely sort of hard packed dirt road, which feels like a road ride, basically. Like when I ride in the area where I have my house in the country, I always mix up pavement and quote unquote gravel, but I never actually need to use a gravel bike or a cyclocross bike because I can go on these quote unquote gravel road, which are essentially like hard dirt, just fine with a road bike. And to me, that is the kind of gravel that I like. If I need something other than a road bike, I'm not interested.
I know what you mean. At this event, the Reggie Ramble, there was like kind of a little bit of all of that. So you got a big variety. After 200K of gravel, I don't really feel like riding gravel again anytime soon.
And if you throw sand into the mix, like I just don't understand.
There was a bit of sand.
Like
yeah,
people saying, oh, dude, this was so sick. I rode in sand. Like, honestly, you're pushing like 400 watts just to keep moving. Like, I just don't see the enjoyment of that. And Tony's right. It's people wanting to be part of the lifestyle. The lifestyle is miserable, but people want to be part of it because they've been told they need to be part of it. And yeah, look, the one thing though, and Lance, I think in one of his ad reads, shout out my friend Lance, he makes a good case for it. He says, look, people are new to cycling. They don't want to be out there on the open road with cars that are maybe looking at their phones, not paying attention to the road. And very often there's an element of truth there that the gravel roads are just a lot less busy. There's no kind of car traffic. And by virtue of the gravel being a crappy surface, the cars are just a lot slower on this surface. So I understand the desire to want to use gravel roads as a means to get away from the car traffic. But, if you notwithstanding that, if you just disregard the car traffic for a second and you just compare, the two disciplines, road versus gravel, like I don't actually believe that anyone prefers riding on gravel.
You've brought up a good point with the kind of definition. Like gravel is this like all-encompassing term for basically everything that's off-road but not quite a mountain bike, right? Like you'll go on a ride, like it's a gravel ride, and then you'll do like 45K a single track, and you're like, well, what's gravel about this? So I guess maybe they need to like define, the term's sort of undefinable, but you're right. There's kind of a level, like there's a loop called the Simcoe Loop around us in Southern Ontario here. Most of it is a sort of rail path with very finely crushed, fairly hard packed gravel, and you could ride at 2018, and it's beautiful, and that I'm with, right? But there's so much of it that is just awful and miserable. And then also part of what always got me into cycling was speed, right? The need for speed. Like you said, whether it be sand or some of this rougher stuff, like you were putting down so much work, both in the watts as well as just like what's going on in your body and your tricep and your core. Just to keep moving. And you're losing that feeling. Whereas like if you're on some even semi-decent road and it's kind of flat, you got a bit of tailwind, you're doing 45, like the feeling is amazing. Like I think gravel has just been a marketing ploy for the last few years. I do agree a lot with what Alex is saying about avoiding cars, but that notwithstanding, pushed out of the side, a road ride is much more pleasurable.
This route I did would have been a lot nicer. Like the scenery was beautiful, and to be honest, the whole event was like amazingly organized. Like it was one of the better cycling events I've done. in terms of like organization and planning and sign up, blah, 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 and all that stuff. But if it was just 200K on the road, it would have been an incredible ride because beautiful scenery, lots of climbing, some fun descents. Because it was on gravel, my body was absolutely ruined the next day.
So I think there's maybe another case for gravel, but I'm actually going to debunk that myth or the argument. And the other case for gravel, and you could argue that there's too many road cycling influencers out there that are pushing road kit and looking aero, looking pro, and that gravel is an interesting discipline as a fuck you to this influencer culture. T-shirt rides, cargo bibs, big water bottles, kind of the stuff that we were talking about with Dustin Klein on the podcast a few weeks ago. You could argue that taking part in that lifestyle is a giant fuck you to the influencer culture that has perked up on Instagram with respect to road culture. And this is where I'm going to debunk this argument. I don't think it works anymore because now you have probably as many gravel influencers pushing this sort of lifestyle as you have road influencers pushing the more kind of Euro, aero, skinny fit kind of, culture of road cycling. So I don't think it works. So does anyone like gravel? Yes, I think we like the scenery of gravel. I think we like the hard packed, somewhat comfortable luxury type gravel. I think I like the Strade Bianche, but I don't like ATV single track stuff that's basically just big mountain bike creeping into gravel.
I do think people like the community. I do have to agree with that a little bit from a perspective, not from my perspective.
You can find that community in road cycling, though.
I think road cycling. You say that, but this is why I like road cycling because it's elitist and there's not really a community. I mean, now there's more community, but it used to be kind of like it was if you're not fast enough, get the fuck off the road, right? And so gravel, and I like that. I mean, I'm not fast enough, but I don't mind being told to get the fuck off the road.
You would get dropped at the back.
Yeah, I get dropped, and I like that. I like that sort of like goal of achievement. But I do understand the people, like the community, at least seems more inclusive. I'm not a part of it. I've done a couple sort of basic gravel things, so maybe it could be all full of shit, but it does seem that people are more funsy.
But the advent of gravel racing has sort of undone that because this whole thing of everyone's welcome, no drop rides, like you're doing gravel races. Like I've done a few gravel rides / races out there and I've gotten dropped the hell out of every bunch. And like, how inclusive was it? Like not that much.
Not everybody goes to race it, like I was there to race it in theory. I definitely didn't win. There was people there to race even the 200K. And then there was people there who were just there to do it and like enjoy it and vibes and community and all that. So I don't think it's still there. And I feel like if it were a road event, everybody would be there to like race it. You know what I mean? So I don't think that racing gets rid of the community vibes.
It's true, right? I mean, now it's not really fair for me to compare Unbound to the Tour, but Unbound, there's top people and pros who race it, but the average Joe can just try and finish it. I mean, you're not, the Tour doesn't also have a recreational side where you all start off together.
There's l'étape du Tour, right?
Yeah, but I'm saying like you all start off together and then the pro peloton pushes you aside and you just try and get up the end of Alpe d'Huez yourself or whatever. So there is that kind of thing where it's like it's a mix. But I mean, for me, I'm just not into it. I want elitism. Like, even though I'm definitely not part of the elite, like I want to strive to it, right? I want
the aspirational.
Yeah,
elite.
I'm aspirational. I spend too much time on Instagram. I want that. So I don't need the community, but I'm stepping out of myself here, and I'm realizing why others would like the community. And I think some people, I mean, let's just boil it down to this: gravel is the craft beer of cycling. Nobody likes craft beer, but everybody feels they need to.
See, I actually do like craft
No, you
beer,
don't.
but
No, you don't.
Yeah, I do.
No, you don't. You'd prefer a Coors.
I'm actually considering getting rid of my cyclocross bike. My father actually had his bike stolen recently. I offered him my cyclocross bike, and in the end, he didn't take it because it was too small for him. But I was going to just give it to him. I just don't need it.
That's sort of where I want to be at, but I'm not going to be at. I'm going to keep my cyclocross bike.
I'm going to keep racing cross. So
I think I'm going to get rid of it just as a statement.
Yeah? Will you literally throw it in the canal despite the pollution? Maybe
we could do like an Instagram live of me throwing my giant TCX in the Canal.
All of this aside, I do think nobody really likes gravel, but if for some reason you think you do, Reggie Ramble's a great event and I would recommend it. But I mean, it's gravel and you probably won't like it because nobody likes riding gravel.
Also, catch us all at D2R2 in Massachusetts next year.
Okay, for our next segment, we have a special guest this week. We are welcoming Nick Squillari, or Nick Squillari, with an Italian accent, the founder and owner of Velokicks, the Australian shoe brand. They make some beautiful custom shoes, but they also make white shoes as well, so just your regular kind of cycling shoes, but pretty interesting company. And so Nick joins us from Australia. And actually, well, first of all, Nick, welcome to Cycling Fashion Week.
G'day. Thanks for having me.
Love the Australian greeting.
I think it was our first good day, even though we've had other Aussies on. So
it's true, and I'm glad that we do, because I like a good Australian accent. And I guess, Tony, why don't you tell the story of how we got in touch with Nick from Velokicks? We alluded to it on the podcast. I'm going to say like 4 or 6 weeks ago or something like that.
I believe it was the Attacker. It was the Attacker episode. And I've been clear here. I don't do a lot of research. This is a hot takes podcast, not a facts podcast. Sometimes I just think of things and say it. And so I was throwing something into the Canal, which I still, maintain is Canal worthy, the item. But in doing so, I threw Velokicks, Nick's company, into the Canal with no knowledge that they were of what they really were, that Nick had started a shoe brand making some really nice shoes. I kind of just thought it was an Instagram account, which we'll talk about, but which is where he started. And so, as we know, this is an internationally renowned podcast. And so it got around and eventually made its way to Nick, and he messaged us. Well, riding Zwift, actually, which I was quite impressed with.
So that was actually hilarious. So he sent us like seven voice messages in our DMs on Instagram. He was on Zwift at the same time, so he was like breathing really hard at the same time. A few Australian profane expressions made their way into the messages, and I actually thought it was really funny. And then Tony got back to him and eventually kind of struck up a conversation, and here we are. Nick's on the podcast today. But I have to say, the voice messages while on Zwift, that's what got me.
Well, I mean, they're probably on OnlyFans now or something like that. I would imagine, with the profanity. Some people are into that.
I felt really bad because I should have. I mean, maybe we have to put a little bit on Nick for having his Instagram account not push that he makes these beautiful kicks, and that it's focusing a lot on the painting and stuff. And so I was unaware, but we talk about big mountain bike and the big brands and stuff. The last thing we want is to shit talk a small brand, especially shoes, because we had Quack on a little while ago, but as far as I know, unlike sort of kit manufacturers and even sort of bespoke bikes, shoes is one thing that doesn't seem like a lot of small companies are getting into. It seems like it's something that's still the majority of people, even if they've got a small batch kit or a custom frame bike, they'll still be wearing S-Works or Physiques or something. So it's cool to see a smaller company come out and make some really nice looking shoes.
So Nick, let's actually talk about your background in making shoes. Like first of all, we asked that question to everyone, but I think it's relevant when discussing people's brands and how they started. Like, how did you get into cycling? What's your background? How did you get into this?
Well, cycling itself was part of rehab. I think like most people, I rode a bike as a kid, rode to uni, those kind of things, as a commuter. But played football, soccer in uni days, and managed to have surgery on both my knees. Had a ACL reconstruction on one and an arthroscope on another, and the rehab from the ACL, that was the second one. And I actually thought I'd be allowed to swim before I'd be allowed to certainly come back to any sort of running or anything. And they said, well, no, the first thing you're allowed to do is ride a bike. And I was just like, well, that's easy. I've got a road bike at home, and hated the idea of swimming. Yeah, just started rehabbing from that, really. I wasn't going to go back to running, too much pain in my knees. I was already a podiatrist. I'd been a podiatrist since I went straight from school to uni. So already had the podiatrist background up and running. And yeah, like it is honestly, it started from rehab, and then a couple of people go, oh, maybe you should race. And
so it's actually great that you're a podiatrist, because as our frequent listeners know, Warren loves to talk about his feet, and Tony actually loves to talk about Warren's feet. So there's some weird foot stuff happening on this podcast. So the fact that you're a podiatrist, into cycling, did a shoe brand, I mean, this is just perfect Cycling Fashion Week content here.
This whole episode's going to be about feet.
So aren't you happy, Warren? And this is perfect for you.
Very, very.
So, okay, so all right. So, and how did the brand start? So, you're a podiatrist. You got into cycling through rehab. Like, when did you start to come up with a shoe brand, and what was the idea there?
Well, I took a little bit of a sabbatical from podiatry and became the front of house and the bike fitter for Baum Cycles, which you guys will know through the Canadian dealer Blacksmith, and was doing their bike fit, and so started paying a lot more attention to all elements of bike fit, but especially the shoe component, the interaction with cleat position, shoe choice, all that kind of stuff. So as a podiatrist, you're always looking at people's feet and what they're wearing and how they're walking, and that carries over to how they are on a bike. And I feel like I'm playing straight to Warren's loves here. And I was literally out on a ride one day and thought, there were all these corners of Instagram that existed. And we're talking circa end of 2015 here. There were all these corners for kit and stuff like that, but there was no dedicated page for cycling shoes. And the intent actually wasn't to feature custom cycling shoes because they didn't really exist at the time, but it was just a page to keep people up to date with the latest in cycling shoes, what was new. There was a little bit of funky stuff being done every so often. So it was just a side hustle. Not even hustle, just to feature cycling shoes. At no point did I think that it would turn into really a brand, and I certainly hadn't intended to unearth the custom cycling shoes, custom painted cycling shoes that I discovered probably only a month or so into starting the account. That sort of became self-perpetuating because other people who are big painters in the game now, and we feature them a lot and they do beautiful work, they had seen our stuff and they had the capacity and the ability to paint, whether it was on canvas or on other shoes, like casual shoes. And they switched over and started doing cycling shoes. So then I'd featured their work and just became self-fulfilling at that point. And it really took off into 2016. So around that time, I was just like, oh, maybe there's a bit of, money here to, for money so I can spend on bikes. And I thought about, getting some shoes myself at wholesale, getting them painted and then selling them. And I put this proposition to my best mate, who was working in the finance arm of a casual shoe company. And he said, well, that sounds like a lot of work. Why don't we just make shoes?
Because that's my question. You weren't actually making the shoes at that point. You were getting them wholesale, getting them painted, and then reselling.
No, I hadn't even started that part yet.
Okay.
That was just a thought bubble I had. It was quite literally on New Year's Eve, and we were sat down watching the Premier League because, again, old soccer habits die hard. Yeah, and his kids are in bed, and he goes, "Well, why don't we start a shoe brand? I can speak to my factories; they'll know factories." And so he goes, I'll investigate. I will, there'll be only a couple of degrees of separation here to find a factory that makes cycling shoes. So he reached out through his network. We found a factory and started from there. And that was how it was launched. We had our season one, which was a pretty wild color to begin with. And then our Blanco laces. And that was meant to be the blank template because a lot of this artwork was done and is still done on laces because there's just so much more space. Styles are convenient, sure, but they take up room, especially on the outside of the shoe where you want there's the most pop for the art. So, and if it's a smaller shoe, the dials obviously are still the same size. So in a relative sense, they're taking up more space.
When you were deciding that, after the conversation, okay, we're going to start our own shoe company, like I sort of mentioned off the top there's not a lot of people who do sort of smaller batch cycling shoes or shoes sort of in general, because my understanding is typically have to offer quite a large size range to be able to, as opposed to sort of a small to extra large, you might be going from a 38 up to a 47 or something. So there's a lot of inventory you have to deal with. What was it besides your podiatry background that made you think like, okay, we can do this? Like, we like the painting. I know feet, I know shoes, but like I can make this a business that works when you're dealing with a lot of big players, right? That most people out there are going to be wearing the big players' shoes.
My background would be and is the differentiator. There's a lot more that we provide in terms of service to people who email in and customers who ask about things about their fitting. There are plenty of times where the email chain becomes a quasi podiatric consult, which I'm very aware of. There are definitely limitations of doing that via emails, but you're never going to get that service from a physique or from one of the other big brands. Like if you email them and say, I've got this problem around the lower third of my fifth metatarsal, they're going to be like, okay, they probably wouldn't even respond.
I mean, that's true.
I don't think they would even understand what you're talking. Yeah, what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So, Nick, actually, a question I want to ask you: since you're a podiatrist, but you also make cycling shoes, it's like from a fitting, a podiatry background, like what makes a good cycling shoe overall? Because I don't think most of our listeners understand that or know that, and I certainly don't. I just look at shoes. I'm like, oh, this seems to fit me. It looks great, and that's kind of my criteria when choosing shoes. So, tell us what really makes a good cycling shoe.
It's hard because. And I'll answer maybe a little bit poorly and through an analogy with a brand that I think I'm in no way rubbishing this brand, Shimano. But what makes a good cycling shoe is kind of an evolving space and is a bit of a movable feast. So Shimano, who are definitely my top three of brands that make great shoes, but their top S-Fire, the 901. Fits differently and is a different last. And there's a lot of differences to the 902, which is their updated shoe. And they have, across the board, gone for a narrower fit. It's a bit more similar. The upper material is different. There's not as much give in the upper. Now, I've ridden the 901s and the 902s, and I think the 901 is a more comfortable shoe for me.
Right, because it depends on your foot. Because you said it was a narrower last, the other one's a little bit wider, so it obviously depends on how your foot is made.
But there's plenty of people out there who are obviously very happy in their 902. But Shimano are enormous, and any decisions they're making or any changes they're making are very considered. So this is not a whim that they've made these changes. So
are those big brands like trying to make the last that just fits the most people, or like they take the average foot, maybe not Warren's feet, but they take the average foot and they're like, we're going to make this shoe because this is the biggest common denominator or something? I
think the big brands will recognize where their key markets are, and they're going to make the best fitting shoe that's going to have the most impact in those markets. Now, the 902, I've got a lot of Australian riders. Obviously, we're very strong here. American riders as well who have come to me and said, look, I bought the 902 in the wide, and it's narrower than my previous 901s in the wide, and they're just like across the board. People are just like, it's a narrower shoe. I need something with a wider shoe. There are other populations like some of the Southeast Asian populations that are just like 902 is great. Like they will have a slimmer fitting foot. Not speaking across the board, but as a generalization. So the 902 is terrific for them. The S-Works 7 is terrific for them. But the Torch, I think, and I think this is very indicative with what Specialized are doing, the Torch is going to fit a different subset of the population. I don't know if you're going to have, the Venn diagram of people who are just like, who would be able to say the S-Works 7 fit me perfectly and the Torch fit me perfectly. I don't think there's a huge amount of crossover in that Venn diagram of people who are going to make that claim. So it does vary. Obviously, not having a super low volume shoe, I just don't think is a great shoe design. So there are some things that you can say is not optimal. The older style cities, for example.
It kind of makes me wonder, just hearing you talk, is when I first got into cycling, I feel like a bunch of people basically told me that cycling shoes are supposed to be uncomfortable, and like not like excruciating, but like it's like, yeah, you want them like, it might have even been Tony.
No, it was me, because I was told, and maybe it's also just because I'm used to it, that they should fit like a hockey skate, right? In a hockey skate, you always wear at least a size and a half too small, and should be very, very snug, right? Because you're not walking in a hockey skate the way you skate, like you don't. So that's kind of how I was presented a long time ago, and maybe because I'm used to wearing hockey skates, so I'm used to that. I also don't like the look of big feet, so I purposely wear a half size smaller in regular shoes, because I'm pretty tall and I always wanted to have smaller looking feet. And so I just got super used to like really snug, tight shoes. And maybe I kind of screwed Warren a little bit, because I was like, yeah, they should be like, you should barely be able to move your foot in them.
But you weren't the only one, is my point. What I was going to say is, I feel like, this was, God, I don't know, like 9-10 years ago. And you definitely weren't the only one. And I feel like it was just like, yeah, they should be uncomfortable. And it was after a couple seasons of wearing moderately to very uncomfortable shoes. And, I tried going like pretty snug and then tried going a bit size bigger. Didn't really dive into like the different shape thing, because I just didn't know any better. But
Warren, trying to interrupt. I just want to say, I just want to put that there is someone who's As much as I love shoes, I'm not an aficionado on the terms. What is the last for all our listeners, including myself, who don't know what that is and are listening, saying they keep talking about this, but what is it?
Well, a shoe last is the positive that is that you've got the upper that is molded around. So just imagine it's like a prosthetic foot, but it's all rounded off and there's no sort of indents for the toes. And yeah, it's what the shoe is laid up on. It's glued on. It's already flat stitched by that point. It's already had for us, it's got its custom paint and everything like that. So that's all done. That's all dried. There's no dials installed. But yeah, that's where the shoe actually takes its shape.
All right, perfect. We learned a little something. Sorry, Warren, continue, because I know there were listeners out there being like, what the hell are they talking about?
What I was going to say is I just found it interesting what you're saying about the companies trying these different sizes, because I feel like there's probably a lot of cyclists out there who are buying these really nice, really expensive looking shoes and are probably in excruciating pain, but they're just like, that's how it's supposed to be. So, and I mean, I don't know. I'm just making this up. I have no clue. I wouldn't be surprised if people just are like willing to tolerate a certain amount of pain to either think they have like awesome looking shoes or just because they think it's normal. I'm sure that doesn't play into the brands, but I feel like for all of the things cyclists can put a lot of thought into, maybe shoes aren't always that, or the fit specifically. Sorry, the fit of shoes isn't something that people put too much thought in it until they get a bit older.
If they
maybe
look good. Did you suffer? Nick's a podiatrist, so I feel like he's going to tell us no. But should you suffer for fashion?
Well, pain is beauty. Beauty is pain, right?
Exactly. I suppose that's actually sort of leads into a good question of you being a podiatrist, like you said, coming kind of bike fitting world, thinking about that. You also, with the Instagram account, knew that kind of you were going to blow up if you posted the coolest looking shoes, whether it be custom or any brand that's sort of releasing stuff. So you must understand that the look of the shoe is as important as the fit. I mean, people do wear Bont shoes. I don't know why. They do it. So obviously some people don't care about the look of the shoe. But your shoes are actually, I'm being honest here, we got a pair of them, but I like them. They're quite nice looking. At what point do you start to say, okay, I've got the fit the way I think will, be able to work for a lot of people, but I'm going to design a nice looking shoe that people will want to wear, not a Bont looking shoe. Are you friends with the people at Bont?
Yeah, one of my mates is the commercial manager.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
No.
Sorry.
I'm in the Canal now, so
yeah.
The aesthetics, 100%. I always laugh about the fact that we built this brand and built this account around custom painted shoes, and our biggest selling shoe is a white cycling shoe. It's not even close to anything else. You're right, Tony. Like the aesthetics, it is always a consideration. It is always something I'm chasing. It's a continual iteration here at VK as well. I can't imagine there's going to be a time where I'm just going to settle and go, yep, that's fine. Like we've got it, we've nailed it. Like dust my hands, kick back. It's all, we're done.
One shoe that you have that I love the look of is the Nebulas collection. The sort of I don't even know how to describe them, but they're kind of shiny. There's a purple one. There's like a red, pink, but kind of fading into yellow one as well. Like just incredible looking shoe. And we've been discussing on this podcast, trying to talk about ways to move away from white shoes a little bit, because we said they're not dead. But you want to diversify your shoe game a little bit. You want to have some white shoes. You want to have some colorful shoes.
Yeah.
And I think the Velokicks Nebulas collection is the perfect way to diversify a little bit away from white shoes. So actually, another thing that kind of struck me about Velokicks when looking at your current lineup of shoes, what you're selling, what you have on the website right now, is the price point. Cycling kit in general is expensive. Like that's just a fact. When you look at the brands that people like, they're just expensive. That's the way it is. And we asked a previous guest on the podcast, Alex Ostroy, who owns the brand Ostroy from New York City. And he said, look, the margins aren't really any higher than any other industry. It just costs a lot of money to make cycling kit. There's a lot of sewing involved. You're dealing with factories in Italy. The materials are pretty expensive. And so that is why it's expensive. But when I look at shoes, very often, like as a consumer, my brain just explodes. Like I look at some of the pricing of those shoes out there, and it's kind of stratospheric. And I looked at Velokicks, and you know what? Like I guess your prices are in Aussie dollars, so 300 Aussie dollars for the double dial white shoes. What is that in Canadian dollar? That's maybe like 275 Canadian dollars.
$298 probably.
Well, I think it's a little bit below parity right now, but in US dollars, maybe 230, something like that. Like that's a pretty attractive price for a pair of double dial, high quality white shoes compared to some of the other brands out there. So talk to us about your pricing strategy a little bit, and whether that's a differentiator or on the other hand, if you're not even thinking about it.
Definitely, it's an intentional strategy from a couple of points of view. First of all, this was until now a side hustle, and then became a much bigger gig. But cycling's expensive, like you say. Kit's expensive, all that kind of stuff. I didn't grow up with a lot of money, so I definitely want to be very sort of empathetic to the plight of other people who are in similar positions and don't have a lot of cash and want a really good shoe. S-Works now, with all due respect to them, they're 650 Australian dollars for the S-Works Torch.
That's a lot over money.
That is
for
a
a
lot
pair
of money.
cycling shoes. Yeah.
Our Blanco dials are $299. Are the S-Works Torch a better shoe? And hand over heart, they are probably a better shoe. Well, the dial system they have on there is a step up from what we've got, and that kind of stuff. Are they more than twice the shoe that we are? Not a chance.
You mentioned your dials, like the dials on the Velokicks, which are not BOA branded, which because we used to say just BOA's the dials, but I've actually found, I believe their A-top to be, not surprisingly, functionally very good, but they even have a little feature that the BOAs I have don't do, that actually quite like, and make it easier when loosening. So,
is BOA just pulling the rollerblade tissue? They're the marketing. They're the biggest name kind of out there. Maybe I don't know if they were first to market or whatever. So like we used to say, you got to have double BOA. And then since speaking to you a little while ago, we switched to double dial because we realized we don't want to give BOA that credit. But like, is BOA, when we think BOA on all the shoes, is it because they're actually superior, make and manufacturer? Or they just got first to market, they're what we think of, and we should really be sort of not thinking, realizing you can get some top quality shoes with non-BOA dials.
Definitely a bit of both. I've got I speak to the main guy, one of the main account managers, one of the top guys in Colorado, Pat at BOA. He's a terrific guy. He reached out. He was just like, let's get on a call. Like probably some of the most friendly interaction I've had in the cycling shoe industry, really. So he's a terrific bloke, and they put a lot of money into researching and to developing their dials. Their new Li2 range is excellent, and their after-sales service is also really great. Like you bust a BOA, which would happen not infrequently, because I've had plenty of shoes with BOAs. I think we all have. You just email them and they send out new dials. So their whole ecosystem is really, really well done.
Like Warren said, what I love about the A-top dials is you just go counterclockwise and it loosens. Whereas with BOA, that doesn't work. You got to pull up, and sometimes it's a little bit harder. So I don't know. I've ridden both. The A-tops are just fine. And I, like Warren said, if it's double the price, it's probably better. I don't know. It's certainly not twice better.
A-top were founded within, I think, about 12 months of BOA. That's the crazy thing as well. They have been doing dials for a long, long time. They're a successful shoe brand. Big shoe, like Northwave, do not use BOA. And I'm pretty sure Northwave styles are a custom run, because you can get custom runs from A-top, and they'll do a custom run for us. We just need to order $200,000.
Just on the price point, I didn't want to, even though I brought up the dial thing, I didn't want to go too far away from that, because I want to ask, because you mentioned, the shoes probably aren't twice as good. I mean, or no chance really, and I believe that. I just don't think any pair of shoes is worth $700. I wouldn't expect you to know, but do you think it's a mix of the upcharge for the branding, or are they using like really fancy materials?
Look, I think Specialized with like their I'm just blanking on that really light upper, which was just 100% Dyneema. They put a fair amount of money into R&D, and they're also on my podium of best shoes. So at some point they've got to pay the team for this development, and and for pushing those boundaries. And that RS shoe, there would have been a lot of development dollars to go into that. That's a design. It's kind of like a basketball shoe, but it's not, and it's been adapted for cycling. Like that, it was a lot. And I saw pics of that on the feed of like Legion boys, 12 months out from when they were more than 12 months from release. So they were working. It took a long time for them to work on that. They need to kind of recoup that in a way. So there's that element to it. S-Works is also now a premium brand. So they're charging that price in part because they can.
Now, Warren, you say I can't spend $700 on shoes. Is $7,000 for a bike, though? That's like a reasonable amount of money to spend on a bike.
Yeah, fair point. Fair point. It's more, I guess, to me, cycling shoes don't necessarily last as long as your bike's
No, they don't.
And I don't think by spending $600, I'm going to get a pair of shoes that last any longer.
Well, this is why you see all those people with like the lace-up Giro Empires from like 9 years ago because they spent $450 on them and they don't want to give it up. And so they're just like, you see someone they're just falling apart. They're usually the like orange and black or the metallic blue or something. You're thinking, man, just get a new pair of shoes. And you can see they can't bring themselves because they spent so much money on that shoe that already wasn't that nice to begin with.
But can I just a quick PSA when it comes to shoe?
Of course, we love
running overtime here, but looking after your shoes, as important as it is to wipe them down and stuff like that, and just kind of keep the grime away. Like find a way to air them out because I do have people, with different brands, and it's happened to my own as well. And God love this customer who we ship our shoes. You guys would have seen in a shoe bag because that can be used when you're traveling and stuff like that. It's much more. There's more use. There's a better use case for it than a cardboard box that's going to go straight into recycling. But I had this fantastic customer who bought a pair of Neros, was keeping them in the bag in his car because he'd drive to his destinations to go in his bike ride and then leave them in the car throughout the day. And he lives in northern part of Australia, and you know how hot cars get in any climate, especially northern part of Australia. And the poor shoes were sweaty after his ride, and they were sitting in a black bag inside of a car throughout the day, and they were just cooking. And if you want to find the ideal way to unbond a pair of shoes, moisture, warmth, for extended periods of time will degrade any cement. And I know this because I've pulled shoes apart. You might not, you guys, I don't know if you guys saw how we would resole a cycling, a soccer shoe onto a cycling shoe base. So I know, and I just for general interest, I need to pull shoes apart to look at the internals. It's hard to do, but you can do it especially if you don't let your shoes dry. And ideally not in direct sunlight, but it goes for any brand. I've seen this is actually why the knits came about. I had a mate who rotted a pair of his Giros. He was just like, I need some shoes that dry better, and it had to be a knit and not and knits. There's not all knits are created equal. Oh, well, there's a lot of differentiation. Sorry, I should say, between how a knit upper is created. So I needed a knit upper that wasn't very dense, that could dry really quickly, had a lot of airflow through it, so it wouldn't accumulate a lot of sweat to begin with. And what sweat was there would dry really quickly. So that was part of the driving factor in the creation of our Flow knits.
Because this is a fashion-based podcast, we've talked a little technical about various things. I do want to say that being clean is very fashionable.
My bike's always dirty though. But
well, I mean, watch your bike. Well, we talked about the noise on bikes, and that typically was watching. I hope people are watching their kit. I've rolled up next to some people. Maybe they just got real hot real fast, but it smelled like they could have maybe gone on day 2 or day 3 on the same kit. So,
Nick, in terms of the brand, have you found that being Australian or being based in Australia was actually a positive factor in your branding globally
100%.
With people that people think Australia is cool in cycling and they're like, oh, it's a cool Australian brand? And
100%.
I think that way personally.
Guys like, we've got a lot to be thankful for guys like Attacker, who you had on previously, and, other sort of pioneering custom kit brands, I guess you would say, but they just did things differently to what Sportful and Castelli were offering. They really plowed the ground for it and definitely made our life easier to move into that space and put Australia in a really good light.
In terms of the Velokicks brand, what are if you have like long-term goals, ideas, aspirations, like where are you hoping to take it? Because as I think I said to you before we started recording, but I appreciate the slightly larger toe box so much that I feel like there's probably a whole lot of cyclists out there who were to discover your shoes, they'd be happy. Or maybe it's just me and my weird feet. Enough about my feet. What are you hoping to do it with the brand going
Well, we
forward?
definitely we're kind of in a situation where we're just like, do we go and chase a distributor into, say, somewhere like North America? Is it going to be worth? Is that going to be worth it? I'd be happy to to talk to some distributors, because the sort of the demographic of the North American cyclists, how their feet, the size of their feet, it's a great match, as finding a great match for the fit of your shoe and the design of your shoe and the upper and the elements that you're appreciating in the shoe, a wider fit around the toe box. It's a great match for Aussie feet, and Aussie feet, it would seem, have got a lot of similarities to North American feet. We're a taller population.
I think it's English speaking feet that's the problem.
I'm Australian and Canadian, and my feet are very average and comfortable, and I noticed no toe boxes. All these terms are new to me because I just put a damn shoe on and walked away.
I just want to say, Warren, I love your wide toe box, Warren. I have to say.
Now, it sounds salacious now. I also think places where you're riding in heat is definitely going to need a shoe with a bit more of a generous upper, because feet swell. Like, it happens. Point, yeah. There's nobody's feet who don't swell. So if you're, in parts of, say Northern England or something like that, or certain parts of Europe, you're not really riding in, stuff over. Sure, your feet can swell in mid-20s temperature, but, in Australia, mid-30s, it can be 30 by 9 a.m. If you're in a narrow-fitting shoe, that's pain.
Yeah, so we have an interesting climate for that, because we have some of the most extreme temperatures on both sides, like extremely hot summers. In some cases, it can be 32, 33 degrees, and you're riding in that. But then you might also be riding in November where it's below zero. So it's difficult to make one shoe to rule them all in the Canadian climate.
Yeah, we've got some Canadian ambassadors. Look, simply because I just want shots of our shoes and the amazing vistas. Like, just especially, it's really good right now to be stuck in Melbourne winter and just be reminded about how beautiful and sunny it is in Canada at the moment. That's really doing it for me.
I mean, that's what all influencers have made their bones, right? By going from whatever's bad to wherever's good, right? A Danish person, they go to Copenhagen, or they go to Girona in the winter, and they look nice and stuff, and they just make everyone jealous. So you flip through their pictures, and it's a cycle of influencers.
I don't want this interview to turn into another episode about trashing influencers. We do that enough. But
yeah.
I'm back to your
the market. Yeah.
But back to your shoes, it's sort of the idea right now, just getting the brand out to more people. Sort of what spurred this to us eventually have this interview in the first place was because Tony didn't realize you actually made shoes. So is it like showing people that both you're more than just like curating these beautiful shoes, you also actually make some pretty good shoes yourself, or just getting the name out there? Like, is that kind of the main goal at the moment?
That message is our biggest challenge that we have at the moment. Is still, is absolutely is still, and like you guys are in and around. It's not like you're looking at it from a 10 mile high view, even with your admitted lack of homework. But yeah, if we're not cutting through to an audience like yourselves, then we need it's on us to really get that message, put that message out more strongly.
Is there any other challenges you have as like a small shoe brand? Because I can only imagine what that might be like, trying to build something up.
You've got the typical challenges of a small startup in terms of challenging the status quo, challenging people's challenging people's natural reaction to, I'm just going to reach for a shoe from the likes of Shimano, Specialized, Physique, etc. It's just getting that cut through and getting the that status and that verification that these are great shoes and they're worth considering. The Australian audience have been, the Australian public have backed us really well in terms of wanting to support an Australian brand. Like, obviously there's Bont. There's also a very real difference with how our shoes ride. Like Bont are super, super stiff, which works. There are definitely people out there who feel they need that and relate to that and just love the way that super stiffness is. But I couldn't ride them. I had a pair myself years ago, and yeah, there's definitely a subset of the population within Australia who want an Australian branded shoe, or people overseas who love the idea of an Australian company but don't want that the way that sole feels. That's our biggest challenge is to cut through.
And we will be helping you do this by recording this podcast, and people will listen to it. and they can message us, they can message you. Obviously look on the website, velokicks.cc, and they'll see all the beautiful shoes you make and the different options that you don't have to go with the big brands.
All right, Nick, let's wrap up. We always do that with each guest that comes on Cycling Fashion Week. We do the rapid fire questions. So we'll just send you a bunch of rapid fire questions that usually have 2 answers. You give us one, the other, quick explanation why that is. Move on to the next question after that. All right, maybe actually that first one, Tony, why don't you do that one as our resident Australian, because that's some inside baseball Australian knowledge there.
So the first one is Yarra Boulevard or Beach Road, which is 2 very popular roads in Melbourne for cycling. So Yarra Boulevard or Beach Road?
I'm 1,500 meters from the Bully. It takes me 5 minutes and I'm there, so I'll take the Yarra. The Bully, that's right. So good. We abbreviate everything.
Bully,
yeah, but you like Beach Road though. Give me because I liked it.
Actually, this just makes me think when Nick sent us those Instagram voice DMs, I think he was actually the first one to use canal as a verb. He said, "You canaled the shoes," and I thought this guy is great. He's got to come on the podcast. Like, you actually gave us some vocabulary for Cycling Fashion Week. All right, next one: dials or laces?
I'm a laces apologist. I'm sorry.
Interesting, contrarian.
Yeah, they're so comfortable.
Oh, I disagree. I find that exactly what you're talking. I did have a pair of lace shoes. Now they weren't like top end shoes or anything. But as much as I typically don't complain about shoes and feet and stuff, that was the one time is that like you said, like I tie them up nice and snug, and then on a hot August day, my feet would swell up and I'd have to like wait to a stop to kind of loosen them up. Whereas now that I'm into dials, confession here, I actually kind of like a single dial look. I know we always say double dial, but single dial can be kind of nice. But I like that a lot of them you can just like back off a little bit, or vice versa, sort of tighten up quickly if you're going for the town line sprint.
It was on the Tour de France maybe, I'm going to say 4 stages ago, someone, I can't remember who, but was adjusting their shoes like on the fly in the descent. And actually someone from the team car, there's an arm that, it was Romain Bardet, that's right. And there's an arm that reached over and then dealt with the shoe. I thought that was pretty cool. So maybe Tony, with your laces, you can't do that.
No, personally.
Poggy's been winning in laces. Come on.
Oh,
it's true.
Well, not anymore. We're recording this on right after stage 11.
Yeah, by the time this episode comes out, things might have changed. But
huge win for disc brakes, not such a huge win for laces. Okay, next one: S-Works painted as Nikes or Physiques painted as Adidas?
I feel like you don't have to answer. I feel like I planted this one a little bit to see have a little fun with our original.
Velokicks painted as Puma. How about that? Which we actually did do, and they look sick.
Cool.
All right.
I can live with that.
Yeah.
Okay. The question, the debate, the hottest one: are white shoes over?
No.
Will they ever be over?
Never.
Thank you. Steel, titanium, carbon, or aluminum?
Look, I'm privileged from having worked at Baum. I still consult for those guys. I was literally in there last Friday. If you want to know someone who's got more shoes than me, Darren Baum. Just quite, it's amazing. Warren, you need to meet him and sit down and talk about shoes. It's a whole day. and feet, shoes and feet. He's not just into welding beautiful bikes. But
his bikes are incredible.
Yeah, they are.
I've got a titanium, I've got a steel, and my TT bike's carbon. So
you still got to choose one. Which one do you like the best?
I reckon my titanium gravel bike, my Orbis, is amazing. I just have so much fun on that because I'm not into mountain bike. So gravel is like it's enough off road for me to be scared only once every 10Ks. Whereas mountain bikes is way too hectic.
So actually, while you're on the podcast as well, we like to give each and every one of our guests an opportunity to shit on mountain bike. So here's your opportunity. You can go ahead and do it.
The funniest thing I find about mountain bikers is that they're just like, oh, roadies are so snobby, and roadies have got this elitist attitude. Mountain bikers have equal levels of elitism. They're just like, oh, I can't believe your fork was damped to 110 psi or whatever it is, and you've only got rock shocks at the back. It's my partner mountain bikes. She loves it, but do not come at me with this roadism or elitist. You guys are just as bad.
Thank you.
That's a great point. Yeah, we don't know any mountain bikers, but I'm not surprised.
And they're elitist about not following the rules. Like we're all about the rules here on Cycling Fashion Week, but they're equally religious about not following the rules.
If you follow the rules, they don't want to know you.
I saw a comment where in relation to our Dustin Klein episode where someone was basically, agreeing with Dustin Klein, not so much with us, but was saying kind of like they do the opposite of the rules no matter what. Like it's just as bad because they were like, oh, when no one was wearing spandex in I wore spandex, but the minute someone started wearing spandex, I stopped. Like you're just as bad as we are with our the Torah of cycling fashion. If you're not doing it for yourself, you're specifically doing it as a sort of antithesis. There's no difference between me and you.
Anyway, that was our regular 5 minutes of shitting on mountain bikes. Shout out Dustin Klein. Hate mountain bikes. Love Dustin Klein. Yeah. Okay, next.
Amazing interview.
Next
that
and
was an
last.
exceptional interview.
Well, yeah. Thank you. Okay, next and last question. Favorite pair of custom painted shoes that you've ever seen?
Again, a bit of a movable feast. Like it's, I fall in love every day kind of with a different shoe. There was a pair that were painted by an Afghani woman in their traditional pattern, and it was a few years ago now. I reckon maybe 2019. And they still to this day, just the amount of work that went into those was just exceptional. We also had a pair painted to match a Indigenous Australian Baum bike, painted by an Indigenous artist in Australia, and they are also exceptional as they are actually on display at Baum.
One last thing, we do that with everyone as well. While you're here, is there anything that you'd like to Canal?
Besides us, the first time around.
No, I think I got my anything in the Canal. Ankle high socks.
Yep.
That's
I mean,
look,
that's a
not
standard.
going to disagree with you.
Yeah,
on
there's
that
no.
one.
That's one of the worst things. Although I actually, if we could have one more second on this, I have a question. I saw a guy riding. I sent a picture to Warren and Alex about it. He looked like he bought all his stuff in 1996 and just never bought anything new again, and it actually looked amazing.
Oh, no.
It was a pro kit, right, Tony?
He was in a Cafe Columbia kit on a like Mape painted Colnago. This guy was just like, but it was like something that just like worked perfectly, and he had ankle socks. But if I recall, like that was kind of the look in like the mid-late 90s. So in my head, I was like, does he get a pass? Because he's just like, he's changed nothing else. It's not like he had ankle socks and like Map or something. Like he bought his shit in 96.
There's an element, there's an element of not giving a fuck in this that I respect and admire a lot. Like trends change, the world changed. Like September 11 happened, the financial crisis, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. This guy doesn't change. He's still wearing the Cafe de Colombia kit. I kind of respect that.
He gets a pass for that.
It was like a race fit or like a club fit jersey, like kind of loose, and the shorts were like pretty short. And I was like, this like the whole thing this guy is doing makes me think that he gets a pass on the short socks.
That's a Panache pass.
Go and watch. Like we were watching the GCN Legends on the Contador. And because my partner got into cycling a bit later in like 2016, so she missed Contador, and we're watching that. Look at the shoes that they're wearing, and some of the fashion from the knees down, and like shoes even like 10 in Contador time, which was only like 10 years ago, not even. They were terrible.
All right, Nick Squillari, Velokicks, velokicks.cc. Check out the website. Check out the shoes. Great shoes, great price point, really interesting colors, interesting paint jobs on the shoes, but also just your regular double dial or lace up white shoes as well that you can get for a pretty affordable price, ships worldwide. So Nick Squillari, thanks a lot for coming on Cycling Fashion Week. This was great to have you, and you're now a friend of the podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me.
You're also a friend of my feet because I like your shoes. So
this is the last shoe company we're ever doing because I can stop hearing about Warren's.
Yes, well, hey, look, maybe Warren might be the perfect test pilot for other uppers that I have to. He's my canary in the coal mine. Like if something's bad, like his feet will find it.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, Nick Squillari, thanks very much. It's great to have you on. Take care.
Yeah,
thank you.
Okay, thank you to Nick Squillari from Velokicks for a great interview. We're moving on to our next segment, flagship segment of Cycling Fashion Week. Into the Canal, where we throw stuff that we don't like from the world of cycling and cycling culture, cycling fashion, into Montreal's La Chine Canal. Or the reverse of a canal is called a camélien, where we want to highlight something that we really like from the world of cycling, cycling fashion, cycling culture. That's called a camélien, which is named after Camélien Oud, which is the hardest col in the entire world right here in Montreal. I'm actually going to start this week, guys, with my Canal and controversial take, maybe. I don't know how many people are going to agree with me or disagree with me, but I'm just going to put it out there. I'm going to throw the summer into the Canal. And it sounds like a bit of a hot take here. I don't want to throw the entire summer, but riding in the heat, anything above 27 degrees Celsius for me is in the Canal. I can't do it. It's too hot. I am sweating. I get dehydrated. I become forced to use 75 centiliter bottles, which, as we all know, per the rule book, are in the Canal. You got to use the 50 centiliters or the 500 milliliters. It just gets too hot. You got to use those big bottles. It looks awful on your bike. You get these white spots on your kit. You start to cramp up. The padding inside your helmet gets all dirty. You got to wash it more often. I do my best riding in the fall, in late September to mid-October, when it's like 10 to 15 degrees Celsius outside. Summer is in the Canal, and unfortunately, I think I'm going to have to throw tropical riding in the Canal as well. So anything like Florida and south of Florida, I think is in the Canal as well by definition, because that's sort of the only weather that they ever get.
I agree, mainly because I did about 100K ride today in 31 degrees Celsius plus God knows what with humidity. And yeah, the last 30K of the ride, I was dying.
We did a very long, it was 185 or 190K gravel ride a couple of years ago, me and Warren and another friend of ours. And it was like, it must have been July or like early August. And it was so hot. And we were like 5K away from the finish. And I just like stopped on the gravel path and like laid down. And Warren had to go get me like a Coke and an ice cream sandwich. Like, and it was purely the heat. Like my fitness was pretty good. Like I think if it had been, 5 or 6 degrees cooler or maybe a little less humidity, a little less sun. That's another thing about gravel. A lot of times there's no trees lining these gravel paths and you're just getting pelted by sun. Anyways, and it's just like, it makes every ride so much harder. It is it is really nice when you get you don't want to be cold, but you get a bit cooler, just sort of comfortable in a short sleeve jersey and some bib shorts.
Fall riding is the best.
No, because I don't want fall riding to me still sort of associates a long sleeve jersey. Maybe
I love fall kid though. Short bibs with long sleeve jersey. It looks incredible.
It's a nice look. But it's a lot of work.
All right, Tony, what do you got?
I have something from a listener. She messaged us on Instagram, and she said she loved hearing our hot takes on the call, which I don't even really know if we had a hot take. I just don't really get where they came from, like what their backing is. They sort of showed up out of nowhere, and everyone was wearing them, and they sponsored every Strava challenge and stuff. Anyway, so basically she was saying that her husband wears the call, which blows me. I mean, she's a listener. Hopefully her husband's a listener, and they should sort of understand. And so this is Alexis Walker, and she said, if it slips that Michael Tatarski has been thrown into the Canal in the next podcast, I wouldn't be mad. So I'm going to throw Michael Tatarski, and he's partly a proxy. He's a proxy for all people out there who don't seem to understand we are in the absolute golden age of cycling kit manufacturers, of cycling fashion, of options to fit your hopefully your budget, but your style, your choice, whatever. So also for maybe about 30 seconds, I'm just going to name cycling brands that are better than the call. This doesn't mean there's more than just this, but just so like if anyone's kind of like trying to kind of compile a list in their mind. So you could be wearing Albion, Attacker, Map, God and Famous, Encore, or Not, Café des Cyclists, Chapter 3, Universal Colors, Panormal even.
Tony, how about Spexel?
Specs, honestly,
probably below.
No, I put it above. I put Spexel above because it's because at least you don't really know it's Spexel unless you like touch it and it kind of burns your hand or whatever. But like the call also like does big advertising and it's a real sort of like sign of who you are. And so, anyways, yeah. I mean, there's a million more brands. If you ever asking for recommendations or a brand, or you just kind of tell us, you can DM us. But just so Michael Tatarski knows, Le Col is in the Canal, and he's in the Canal for wearing it. Like, go and buy some of there's just so much option, and you can get artist design series, you can get minimal kits, you can get pastels, you can get earth tones, like you can get just anything you want. So there's no excuse to be wearing Le Col. And also, someone tell me, because I could probably Google it, but I'm not gonna. Where Le Col, like who's backing it? Like is it who's like is it Target? It's like who's like a Walmart rival that's like the Walmart boys bought
Target.
Rafa.
Let's just start that rumor.
Yeah,
Target's Target's behind Le Col.
Yeah. Also, they go in the Canal as well because this is still actually me throwing Michael Tatarski into the Canal, but just like kind of Le Col sort of part of it is I believe they're actually a British brand with the French name, and I don't like that.
Okay, so Michael Tatarski, you're in the Canal. I don't love that the Canal section is going into ad hominem attacks like this, but hey, it was a request from a listener, and it's just the kind of people we are. We go the extra mile for our listeners, and Tony delivered this week. Warren, what do you got this week?
It's going to tie back to the event I did again, but it's not the event itself. It was in planning for the event, my nutrition, if you will, because I was attempting to do it, not racing to win, but trying to do it in a decent time. I wanted to minimize the amount of stuff I was carrying. I would never run with a bar bag. I'm not going to carry food that way. Anyway, the way the event was designed, you go through the start finish area twice in the 3 loops to do the 200K, so you can restock there.
It's actually nice because you can bail as well.
Yeah, it was great. And I did not bail.
I probably would have, but
I definitely would have.
So anyway, I didn't want to carry a lot of stuff. And so a friend of mine who she had done Unbound earlier this year, and I was just asking her, like, how do you feel a longer ride? Like, obviously this is not Unbound, but she recommended this like mix to put in your drinking bottles. So it turns your water bottle into 400 calories. I'm just throwing liquid calories into the Canal. I'm sure it works for a lot of people, but for me, it did not agree with my stomach. It made me gassy and want to vomit. It was effective. It worked. It did the job, but I'm going to throw it into the Canal for making me feel like I was going to barf. Personally, it's not for me. And then I told her afterwards, I told my friend that, oh yeah, my stomach didn't really agree with that. And she's like, yeah, that kind of happens. And I was just like, so that's kind of, I guess really what I'm throwing is gravel racing into the Canal, because if you have to drink liquid mix like that and then you feel sick and that's normal, why would you do that? Gravel's
taken on the wrong portion of the suffering of cycling. Like suffering when I started riding, it was, and I've given a chameleon to the book, The Rider. And, there's like a beauty in the suffering and in the road cycling suffering, it's like the suffering of your legs and your lungs and your heart and sort of pushing yourself. Whereas gravel riding is not like a kind of beautiful suffering. Like it's a real suffering. Like it's like your body's achy because you're you're shaking and stuff like that. And then, you've got to shove these awful calories you don't want to have down and stuff like it. Maybe we should just do one whole 5-hour long episode about how awful gravel racing is. Because now that now that you've opened the can of worms, all I can think of is sort of bad stuff.
We should record it while riding on gravel, and then people will hear how fucking bumpy and chattery it is, because our mics will be going ugh.
Okay, that's it for another episode of Cycling Fashion Week. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Warren. Thank you to Nick Squillari of Velokicks for the great interview, focused on cycling shoes, focused on feet. Warren was very happy. Very glad to have him on. So thank you, Nick, friend of the podcast. Hopefully we'll have you back on another time. Check out Velokicks on Instagram @Velokicks, or check out their website as well, velokicks.cc. We are, as always, sponsored and brought to you by Le Club, leclub.cc, the best website out there if you're looking for cycling kit that's premium, that's elite, that looks good, that has panache. They have MAP, they have universal colors, they have Albion, they have Sweet Protection, Quack shoes, they've got it all. The best brands, one location at leclub.cc. And if you use the code Fashion Week 15, you even get 15% off your order. How nice is that? At leclub.cc, tell them Alex, Warren, and Tony sent you, and check out their coffee as well. Incredible coffee made right here in Montreal. And we hope to go see them in person sometime this summer and bring you content from there. We will be back in a couple of weeks with more Cycling Fashion Week. Until then, be well, ride in the heat, and enjoy yourselves. Take care.